would like to address the question of actual and virtual philosophically. I shall do this by first looking at the meaning of each term and then explore how they could be related. The term actual can be defined as existing in fact or reality, whereas virtual can be defined as almost or nearly as described, but not completely or according to strict definition. When we look at these definitions, it would seem that actuality is a more absolute state than virtuality. That is, something that is actual exists without any doubt, whereas something that is virtual may not exist at all. It is dependent on certain conditions being met. One way to think about the relationship between actual and virtual is in terms of a spectrum. At one end, we have actuality, and at the other end, we have virtuality. In between, there are various degrees of virtuality. For example, we can say that an image on a computer screen is more virtual than a real-life object. This is because the image only exists as long as the computer is switched on, and it is not a physical object that we can touch or interact with in the same way as a real-life object. However, we can also say that the image is less virtual than a completely imaginary object because at least the image on the screen exists in some form. So, we can see that there is a spectrum of virtuality, with actuality at one end and complete virtuality at the other. Where do we fit into this spectrum? Are we more like the image on the computer screen or the completely imaginary object? It is difficult to say for sure. We could argue that we are somewhere in between because we do exist in physical form, but we also have a lot of imagination. It is also worth noting that our concept of actual and virtual is constantly shifting. For example, 50 years ago, the idea of a virtual reality was something that existed only in the imagination. Today, there are devices that allow us to experience virtual reality in a very realistic way. So, what was once considered to be virtual is now becoming more actual. Similarly, what was once considered to be actual may become more virtual in the future. It is impossible to say for sure where the boundary between actual and virtual lies. It is also difficult to say how our concept of these two terms will change in the future. However, one thing is certain: the relationship between actual and virtual is complex and fascinating, and it is something that we will continue to explore for many years to come.